Welcome to Mobility Matters, the official Cartus podcast where we promise you insightful, expert, and above all, honest conversation about global mobility and talent management. So join us for another episode as we delve deep into mobility's hottest topics and trends. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to Mobility Matters, the official Cartus podcast. I'm Jackie Charney, Director Supply Chain Management at Cartus, and on this episode, we're going to be looking at today's U.S. temporary living market. What are those key challenges we're all facing at the moment? And if we can't eliminate these issues entirely, what actions do we need to take to help at least alleviate them for relocating employees and their families? I'm delighted to be joined today by a valued Cartus supplier partner and industry expert, Kara Peshko, Vice President, Strategic Alliances, Global Mobility at National Corporate Housing. And joining Kara is Brenda Thoney Johnson, Director, Strategic Business Solutions at Cartus. Welcome, Kara and Brenda.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
All right. So, Kara, can you give us a general picture of the temp living market at the moment? What trends are you experiencing across the US?
Yes, Brenda, I'd be happy to. So, I think we're all aware of what has been going on in the housing market in the US today and yesterday. When you look at the last 2 years post pandemic, right, when you're looking at the housing market, very low supply, creating that very high demand. And what did that equate to? It equated to higher pricing. And quite frankly, it's been a heyday for landlords. Property management companies, they can demand higher rental rates as well as longer lease terms due to these market conditions. Now, I know that the market is changing. However, there's still not enough product out in the market to make it a high supply. So, along with this, the property management companies, they're looking at minimizing their exposure with corporate housing. They're limiting how many corporate housing leases their property can manage effectively. They don't want short notices. They want to manage stricter lease terms and stricter notices. They can also charge extremely high month-to-month rates and have been doing this. So the property management companies that we work with for our apartment inventory, they have what they call a lease optimization software, LOS. And it's truly like what the hotels do, what the hotel software, where it senses what that supply and demand is, and they can raise and lower their rates based on occupancy. So I'll give you an example. When you think about the Super Bowl, right? You go to the Super Bowl, you go to a city where the hotels normally run 200, 300, maybe 400 a day. But during Super Bowl, those hotels go up to 2,000 to 3,000. So it's pretty much the same. It's a lease optimization software that really shows them what they can charge. Another trend is occupancy. Occupancy is still holding strong. Now, as newly built apartment buildings enter into our marketplace, that's going to change the landscape. But most likely, those rents are going to continue to stay steady. From everything I've read and I've heard, rates will not be decreasing. I will say, though, that amazing growth and the profits that property management companies and owners have enjoyed post-pandemic are falling back down a bit, and they're starting to normalize. Overall, in the temp living industry, there's been a lack of options over the last year. With new construction, there are delays and increased cost in rental rates due to product cost incline. So I do see that supply and demand will be a bit more manageable, although I think still a bit frustrating. We've heard about the layoffs, right, with some of the large tech companies, and I think people believe this is going to impact the apartment industry and temp living industry. But with interest rates that are higher, for example, this creates rental demand. So buyers are choosing to wait this out and stay in their rental apartment, causing yet another reason why supply may be hurting. I do see this turning around, Brenda, in 2024. As we know, everything is cyclical. Everything comes back around, right? Lastly, I want to talk about rebids because this is a trend that we've been seeing since last year, and it's continuing to happen this year. Rebids happen, what a rebid is, right? Rebids happen when an employee does not choose any of the original options they are provided. Therefore, they come back and want more options. In the environment we're in, it continues to be a challenge. They're searching for a perfect temporary living apartment that suits all of their specific criteria. So I'm going to compare this to the rental car industry, right? When we rent a car with our preferred supplier, mine is Hertz, and let's say I'm a member of the President's Club, and when I land in my destination, I expect to walk out and get the exact car that I asked for, right? Low mileage, leather seats, heated steering wheel, but instead I arrive late, and when I get to the car lot, there's very few cars. So guess what I do? I just pick the best choice at that moment. In temp living, the list of criteria sometimes prohibits that employee from making that quick decision, right? And getting the apartment that they want. In order not to lose out, they need to look at their criteria. Maybe the option fits 5 of their 7 specific requirements. It may be the best fit for a 30-day stay, but they want the ultimate choice with all of their criteria being met. When they have this plethora of criteria that may not be fulfilled completely in any options they're being given, they want more. But in the challenge in today's market, there may not always be more options that will meet every single criteria. They have to remember this is a short-term stay. It is not a forever home. There may be some criteria they can live without for 30 days. They need to decide what is absolutely necessary in their temp living, and hopefully they will get the option that meets their ultimate need. Quick decisions and understanding it's temporary, not a long-term housing situation, right, will afford the transferee a good option that's going to house them well during their stay. No matter the trends that I've just talked about, we must be flexible and adapt quickly to market changes.
So many great points. And let me first just touch on the whole rebid process. This is something that I know we spend a lot of time working with our consultants and helping them really manage expectations for transferring employees. And I think that I loved your analogy about the rental car. I think that was absolutely perfect. One of the things that we spend a lot of time talking to transferees about is the fact that this is not going to be their permanent residence,
Right.
that this is a blip in time. It's a moment in the process of their relocation. And, setting those expectations very, very early on during that initial welcome call, I think really do help manage those expectations. However, it is hard for many people, to understand that, when they're going through one of the most stressful times of their lives, that this is just a temporary, by nature, temporary housing, temporary
Yes.
accommodations. But I love what you said, and it sounds like you and your team are doing all of the right things. I did want to ask you a question to a point that you had made earlier when you were talking about lease terms. And, I know back in my days in temp housing, even then it was difficult to secure short-term leases. Typically, the shortest term lease that you could secure would be 90 days, for example. So, are you finding that landlords and property owners are more open to corporate housing if you're willing to take? I know at times they would even say, can you take a 15-month lease? Is that something that they're offering, or are they really, kind of putting up the guardrails and saying, we're not interested in temp housing in our properties?
That's a great question, Brenda. And I will say this, that yes, are they interested in the longer term lease? Absolutely. They are. And they will take those certain properties. Now, this kind of goes into something I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, but it's the property relationships that you have. If you have those great relationships, you can typically get what you need. But yes, are they willing to take longer term leases? Absolutely, over short term. The other thing is when I'm talking about how they want to minimize their corporate leases, a lot of that came from the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, everything stopped, right?
Mhm.
And they lost a lot. Corporate housing companies pulling out, regular renters in the apartment not paying rent. They went through a very tough time that I think a lot of us looked at and said, are we ever going to come out of this? And quite frankly, I'm surprised we came out of it as quickly as we did, because within, like
Mhm.
I said, the last 2 years, they have been reaping the benefits of low availability. And so to answer your question, yes, will they take longer term? Absolutely.
And another thing that that you mentioned that was interesting to me was the layoffs. I'm thinking about some of these large metropolitan areas, like the Bay Area, for example. And we've seen people at home now for a couple of years, and now, though, we're starting to hear that they're being called back to the office, even if it is a hybrid type situation. So,
Right.
again, that will be interesting. I think a lot of people, probably did perhaps give up those leases and move outside of the city to a lower, an area where the housing wasn't as expensive. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens now that companies are starting to say, especially in that tech space, we actually do want you in the office, whether it's 2 days a week, 3 days a week. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with inventory with
Yeah.
that return to the office.
I agree, Brenda. And I just read an article recently talking about how the companies, and I think we've all seen this, but the companies are putting more mandates on the employees to come back in.
Right, right. Very fascinating. Well, moving on. So, we're certainly hearing from our account management teams here at Cartus that there is a shortage in areas like, again, Northern California, New York City, Seattle.
Mhm.
What is your experience in those markets? What are you seeing, and what is National Corporate Housing trying to do to combat these challenges?
Right. We are seeing the same in those areas, Brenda. Some of the things we're doing to combat these challenges is to take, like what we talked about, longer term leases and then backfill those apartments so we can keep those apartments in our portfolio of inventory. It's challenging, though, right? It's challenging. We need the business to be able to keep the apartments full. We're securing interim programs sooner. We're taking out that inventory in January and February timeframe so we have that availability inventory for the current needs that we may have, as well as holding that inventory for the intern season. Another thing that we're doing is we're reaching out to our clients. We're encouraging them to take block business or to take block apartments for business, which allows them to have that inventory for their current relocating population in key markets such as NorCal, New York, and Seattle.
In case people don't understand what that means, that block business, because again, not every organization, takes that approach. Can you just explain what you're talking about when you say that block business?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, block business is really when they know that they have a population that's coming in. Either it may be a project management, right? It may be a project that they're working on in a specific city, let's say Seattle, and they know they're going to have, 100, 150 people coming in to work on this project. Or maybe it's 10 people coming in to work on this project, but they're looking at what their future business needs are, and they're going ahead and taking those apartments in advance because they know that they're going to need them for an extended period of time.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. The other thing that we're asking our clients, Brenda, is we're asking for that first right of refusal because as a corporate housing company, we're taking the risk, right? We're going out, we're taking these apartments. We want to have that availability for our clients, and we also need that commitment from them. So we're asking for that first right of refusal. We're also seeing that our clients, as I said before, they're taking that inventory sometimes even before they have a transferee to go in that apartment because they have the knowledge of, we know we're going to have this move. We know we're going to need apartments. We know this key market right now doesn't have the availability that we're going to need. So what do we do? So they're looking at taking apartments in advance. We're also recommending to our clients that they look at the specific key market that they need and they select preferred properties. We just did this with a client of ours actually in my hometown of Concord, North Carolina, but we did this with a client that we said, "Hey, listen, we know you're bringing in a multiple, group of people for your new facility. Let's look at the properties. Let's look at what you want to be your preferred properties in a designated area." Because what that does is once they say, "Hey, property ABC, these are the ones we want for our employees," then what we're able to do is the relocation consultant at the relocation management company they can then decide on the transferee's behalf to secure the housing quickly. So even though the market may be letting up a bit, it is still important for the transferee to make that quick decision as not to lose a viable option. Making those decisions quickly so the inventory is still available to book. Also, the other thing that we're talking to clients about is, having the transferee, the employee, have a second option. I think we've talked about this with Cartus, right? It's about having that second option just in case the first option is booked. Brenda, I know you and I have spoken previously about how companies can also help themselves, right? What are some of the things that Cartus account management teams are advising their clients with U.S. relocation programs?
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, again, so many amazing points, and I'm taking notes here, follow-up questions that I have for you. But you've really hit on a lot of the main points, that we counsel our clients on, and specifically, again, making those quick decisions, understanding the temporary nature of the situation, the backup plan. Again, when the options are
Yes.
sent out to them, not just saying, okay, option A, that's it. It's that option or there's no option for me. Really helping them understand that we really do need to go as deep as possible. So if they're presented, with 4 options, let's rank them because you and I both know, Kara, that
Right.
especially during peak season, there are times where we may be going
Right.
down, to those, third and fourth options, if there are even that many available. Again, back to the supply chain, and
Right.
yeah, yeah. I had a question for you too. I'm curious. We obviously here at Cartus, we do, we help our clients with a lot of intern programs. Um, are you seeing the same, like, are you seeing volume picking back up again? I know there was a period there where really interesting things happened with intern programs. Organizations went from having their interns, sometimes sleep 2 to a bedroom to going to, maybe it's a 2-bedroom apartment, but everybody has their own bedroom, to single apartments for interns. We've seen reductions in programs. What are you seeing? Are you seeing that intern population ramping back up again? This kind of just brings me back to the whole return to work type, mentality that we're seeing,
Right.
not just here in the U.S. but globally. And I'm just curious if you've seen a rebound in those intern numbers.
Right. That is a really great question, Brenda. You know, it has rebounded. So I will say that. But I will tell you, things are a little different. When you mention
Mm,
about, 2 people to a 1 bedroom or whatnot, that has changed. So people are looking at, hey, we can't put 2 people in a 1 bedroom. We put 1 person per bedroom. So a couple of things have changed. The other thing too is I think the reason why it has rebounded is because companies realize, well, before I say that, I will say this. Manufacturing companies stuck with the programs pretty much even through the pandemic. Your tech firms, et cetera, that have a
right.
huge amount of intern business, that kind of went to the wayside. They still did some small programs. So one thing I've seen is that they have rebounded. They may not be as large as they were back in 2019, but they have rebounded. They are still doing this because they are seeing the importance of having people in person in the office, creating that team camaraderie, creating those people, letting those people see what their culture is. So it's important to have the interns where the actual office is.
Yeah, interesting. And the last question that I wanted to ask you is, with this lack of inventory, I know national corporate housing it has always been at the forefront of, spearheading any, industry trends, new ideas, groundbreaking, options. When we're looking at a limited option in the, like in terms of, traditional apartment communities, are you investigating more that private side, whether it be, single family homes or townhomes?
We do have a division of our organization that actually can do that, and we do. We rent from individual condo owners. Actually, the owner of our organization, our CEO, owns several condos in the Denver, Colorado area, for example, and those are for rent. So yes, do we look outside of the normal apartment community? Absolutely. What we do is we want to provide housing where our clients need it. And not always is that an apartment community.
Right. And I know duty of care is always top of mind for you and your team. So I know that those
Yes.
private options, I'm certain, have been
Are vetted.
vetted just as diligently as any of the more traditional options.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about rising costs, inflation. That's all we're hearing these days. It might be useful for our listeners if we outline exactly why relocation costs are rising. Can you give us a little bit of background on that, Kara?
Yes, certainly, Brenda. There's a variety of reasons as to why costs are rising. Most predominantly are labor and product shortages, as well as supply and demand. Again, this is 2023. I do think that, we've all seen the housing market. It went crazy. Now it's kind of normalizing a bit. So that's going to change. I don't think it's going to change as quickly as some people may hope that it does. The cost to build new properties is elevated, as well as the supply for products been low. So that's created an expense that's slowing down new construction growth. Well, guess what? We need new construction to have more supply. Supply and demand, when I talk about that, the property management companies, they are a for profit company. That's what they do. They want to make as much profit as possible. And as we all know, everything comes full circle. Their current environment, and this past, 2 years environment, they made the most money that they could make. They're trying to make up for monies lost during the COVID pandemic. Month to month leases are higher because there's a lack of inventory. They don't have to let us have a month to month lease. They can go and get someone that will take a 12-month or longer lease with them. Negotiated rates in the environment we're in today is not what it used to be because the properties, they don't have to negotiate. If we don't take the apartment, someone else in the blink of an eye is going to take that apartment. So gaining inventory is
Right.
key. It's no longer about obtaining less expensive rates.
Right. It's all about the supply chain. It's all about what is available at this point.
Correct.
And again, that kind of brings things back to what we're doing here at Cartus and how are we, educating and keeping our clients up to date on what is happening, out there. Why are they seeing those increased costs? And that comes back to supply chain. Let's bring it all the way back to, the shortage of trucks and drivers and the increased costs of
Right.
cardboard and crate. I mean, the entire process of relocation across the board has increased exponentially in terms of costs. But as you said, it's all, necessary if we're going to continue hiring the best of the best. That is why organizations relocate team members. They're trying to keep that key talent. So, or attract that key talent.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
And, again, kind of circling back on, I've talked a little bit about what we've done to manage expectations with our clients, but I'm sure you're doing similar things with your clients and transferees. And I'm just, curious if you have some ideas on how you manage those expectations and why it's so important specifically for temporary living services, which is very different than many of the other service offerings when we're talking about relocation.
It is. It is. When you think about temporary living, I think, okay, it's temporary, but at the same time, it's where they're living, right? So again, education is so important. The relocation consultant, the company liaison, us as your partner, we need to continue to educate the transferee on the marketplace conditions and cost. Temporary living is just what it says. It's temporary. So if the transferee is in their desired area or close enough, all other criteria should be considered optional. Our goal together when providing a corporate apartment is to ensure that that assignee that they get up and running, right? That they're productive at work from the get-go, from the first day they're on the job. We need to make sure that their move-in is flawless and they have everything that they need to survive their short-term stay. That's what is most important. This is not their permanent home, so understanding that is key with ensuring that they're happy in their apartment.
And you touch on such a great point. At times I think companies might look at temporary housing and think, is this perhaps an area that I can eliminate? Could I cut costs? We're hearing from a lot of our clients right now that they've been tasked with some pretty significant cost cutting measures within their organizations that for whatever reason 10% seems to be the magic number this year. Cut your mobility program by 10%. But truly,
Oh,
I think what you said is so important, Kara, and that is that these individuals need to be in that new location. They need to be comfortable. They need to be well rested. They need to be ready to hit the ground running. And to be able to have a space that they
yes.
call home, even if it is temporary, is absolutely critical to the success of that relocation, or if it's an assignment or an internship, et cetera. So I'm so glad that you brought that point up again, because when I hear, mobility leaders, talking about eliminating, temp housing, or offering a lump sum, for this. We all know a lot of times they won't use that lump sum for the temp housing. I
Right.
cringe a little because I really understand the importance. I've seen it firsthand, when those transferees can get to their new location, feel settled, feel as though they've got that safe space. So, very great point.
I agree with you. I do want to touch on that again, that even though I'm saying please look at your criteria and just really go with what's most important, that these options that come over may not meet every single criteria on your list. I still want people to understand and to know that it is our job as a corporate housing company to make sure that they are comfortable, that they feel good about their apartment, that they have a great living space that they feel comfortable in, so they can do what they need to do and put their mind on work and not worry about where they're staying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listening to you, it's very understandable why we have such a strong partnership with National Corporate Housing. Obviously, there's quite an alignment between our two organizations, and it's wonderful to see. And with that, I think we are about at the end here. I will pass it back over to Jackie.
Thank you, Brenda and Jackie.
Wow. All I can say is wow. Thank you both for that great discussion. So much information and really informative and educational. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to Mobility Matters through your favorite podcast streaming platform. And as always, if you have a question we didn't cover or would like to request a topic for upcoming episodes, please email us at cartussolutions@cartus.com. Thank you, everyone, and take care.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Mobility Matters, the official Cartus podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Mobility Matters through your favorite podcast streaming platform. And as always, if you have a question we didn't cover or you'd like to request a topic for an upcoming episode, why not email us at cartussolutions@cartus.com. See you next time.